So we have Rosemarie Noone from the Hunt Museum and Colm O'Toolaheim, I hope I'm saying that right, from the Fahan Heritage Group. You'll probably notice we're doing a Zoom webinar, so as attendees you're not popping up, but you can ask questions with the Q&A button or comments, so please feel free to ask questions. We'll stop probably after about 15 or 20 minutes to go through some questions, and then we might stop again. So we're also going to be joined at around 7:45 by Beatrice Kelly. And she is Head of Policy and Research at the Heritage Council. We're delighted to have her join us as well at the end to discuss more generally what other resources are available for heritage projects who are trying to crowdfund or get funding or other types of support. So if you can't stay until 7:45, don't worry, we are recording tonight's webinar, so you will be able to access it again. You'll be able to access it via the Business to Arts YouTube channel. So just to step back a little bit and introduce Funded, some people listening might not be completely aware of what Funded is. So we're an all-island crowdfunding website that supports creative projects. We were established in 2011, and over the last 9.5 years, over 5 million euro, should I say, has been raised for around 1,100 creative projects. So we've had a massive impact for projects in lots of different categories, ranging from heritage to design, visual art, different types of events, and all types of categories, really. So we're a rewards-based platform, which means that project creators need to create rewards which their funders will receive in return for their donation. And then also we're all or nothing. So if you set your target at 10,000 euro and you do a 6-week campaign, if you haven't reached 10,000 euro in that 6-week period, you will get no funds. So that's the model that we use, and there are different models out there, but that's the Funded way. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Rosemarie. So Rosemarie, you're a business developer at the Hunt Museum. So the Hunt Museum is based in Limerick, and you work with schools, universities, art colleges, and local communities to try to change lives with culture, creativity, and learning. And the Hunt Museum exhibits one of Ireland's greatest private collections of art and antiquities, donated by John and Gertrude Hunt to the people of Ireland. And the collection is housed in Limerick's 18th century former custom house. So hi Rosemarie, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks Michelle. Thanks for that.
Good, thanks for joining us this evening. So yourself and the team at the Hunt Museum, you set yourself the challenge of raising funds this year for your new garden at the Hunt Museum. Now, I'll just start by saying you raised over 17,000 euro during a pandemic. So congratulations to you and all the team. It's an amazing achievement. But I wonder, just to start with, maybe could you just give us a brief overview of what the Funda Cobble campaign was about?
Okay, well, the project we were looking to have funded was a Hunt Museum in the Garden, which is going to be a green open space in the heart of Limerick and open to all. So the idea is that it'll bring the museum outdoors by installing enormous sculptures that are inspired by Hunt Museum artifacts. And we hope to attract people from all walks of life, and for it to be a place of leisure and culture and play for children as well. The objects that are installed there will be installed there. We're going to encourage children to climb and play on them, and hope to arouse their curiosity about the museum itself and the collection inside the museum. So there'll also be an oversized chess set that will be 3D printed using recycled ink made from plastic bottles collected by transition year students. So that's an education program that's built into the development of the project. And there are other educational and outreach programs built into the development. One other one is the creation of one of the really large sculptures with a couple of transition years, which is separate to that. So the garden was a professional design by Nicola Haynes, who won a design competition, an open design competition, but she'll be working with the community very much. So different community groups, the Limerick Mental Health Association, volunteers, Friends of the Hunt Museum, will all work together to create the garden and to maintain the garden long term. So there are a lot of, it's very much a garden built for the community, by the community. And I suppose that's where we thought crowdfunding would fit well, you know, supported by the community, we thought. So that's kind of why we thought a crowdfunding campaign would work. You know, we built into the campaign from the start the idea of trying to create ownership or foster ownership among the community and a deep connection with the garden. So the whole campaign was kind of designed around that, you know, to have your name engraved on a cobble that's permanently installed in your garden, or maybe a name of your child who, you know, have fun going to find where the cobble is and genuinely feel a part of it, literally in the fabric of the place. So
great.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back to talk about the actual rewards that you had, because I know you mentioned this fun to cobble, which literally people were doing cobbles in the garden. So we're going to come back to that. I'm going to move over to Colm now. So Colm is a member of the Fahan Heritage Group, which has two main goals. The first is to protect St. Murray's Cross from further erosion. The crowdfunding project that they ran was called Save St. Murray's Cross. Their second goal is to render sound the crumbling remains of the surviving church gable. So the early monastic site of St. Murray's Cross is located in the village of Fahan, which is between Buncrana and Derry. And for anyone who may not know, so St. Murray was the patron saint of the O'Neills, and they founded the monastery in the late 6th century. And it flourished as a centre of learning and piety until plantation times. And this cross was recognised as a precursor to the traditional Celtic high crosses. So Colm, it sounds like it's a really massive undertaking for you and your group. Do you want to give us a little bit of a background in terms of crowdfunding for this phase of the project? Because you actually do have a larger kind of goal.
Yeah, this is a project that developed rather than was set up. We started off by undertaking to preserve the cross, and we found out that beside the cross was what was called a Fahan Old Church, which was a very picturesque ruin covered in ivy. But when we investigated, we found out that this ruin was ready to fall down. So our priority was diverted. We moved over and we had to stabilize these ruins. And I think anybody that gets involved in a heritage scheme, they'll realize that nothing is simple. So as soon as you touch it, you're into engineers, architects, consultants. So it became, rather than just a normal community project, it became a very expensive project, and it's the expense developed. The first thing that we had to do was we had to get an conservation architect who recommended a methodology for preserving the church. Then we had to get specialized builders, and it was fascinating to watch them, really, the way they dismantled the old church and rebuilt it. So like in total, over about 6 months, the total cost came to about €30,000. So before we got into that, we realized we had to do some serious funding, and we looked at all the usual outlets, you know. So we had a number of normal fundraising events. Like we ran an auction, which was very successful. Like we managed to knock €7,000 out of an auction. We had a series of concerts and things like that, all the usual things. But we needed to make a breakthrough, because as you were making money, you were spending it on various consultants and so on and so forth. So we decided on who decided on crowdfunding? The committee. because none of us had ever heard of, well, we knew what basically what crowdfunding was, but the mechanics of it we knew nothing about. And I think I came to a seminar that Funded had in Dublin, and that's where I got the mechanics of how crowdfunding works, and we took it from there.
Great. Great. And you mentioned there, Colm, I suppose in terms of the budgeting for your entire project and coming to, you know, the conclusion that it was going to be around €30,000. And I suppose the project that you ran on Funded, can you tell us maybe a little bit about how you decided? So your target was €15,000, and I know that you were using that for very specific parts of the project, of, you know, the phase of the project, so like scaffolding, survey of the stonework, construction of buttresses, so various different parts that you were fundraising for. But how did you arrive at 15,000? Because I think a lot of people usually ask, like, how much should I aim for and what's realistic?
Well, it was a combination of we needed a lot of money, but then you have to be somewhat realistic. Looking at other projects, we realized like 15,000 was on the upper side of the project. So to take it on was going to be a lot of work. So ideally we should have been looking for 30,000, but we realized that was out of our depth. To make an indent into what we needed at least 15,000. So that was just a compromise, you know, to go for that.
Okay, and Rosemary, so your entire fundraising target was well above what you were looking for and Funded. So just in terms, maybe you could give us a bit of a background, because I know the big goal was around 80,000.
It's actually in excess of 100,000. We have actually generated close to 80 now, between the funded campaign, funds that came in on foot of the campaign, separately directly to the museum, foundation funding, and we participated in a JP McManus Pro-Am pre-qualifier last year, which was a fundraising event as well, and had some corporate sponsorships. So that kind of totals in around 80. But we were nowhere near that when we began talking about the crowdfunding campaign. But we knew that there was no point, it just felt pointless really to overreach. We felt initially, we felt 25 was appropriate. And then when, you know, COVID entered, stage left, everything changed, and we had to contemplate whether or not it was appropriate at all to go ahead with the campaign, and if so, how, and how we would change our approach. And then we landed on 15. We thought 15 was achievable. And it turns out maybe 20 would have been, but who knows?
Well, you did hit above your target. You were aiming for 15,000 and you got nearly 18,000, which was fantastic. And in terms of, I suppose it was interesting because the funded campaign you were using you kind of budgeted for specific parts of it. So in terms of removal of railings to increase public access, landscaping of the new design, choosing and engraving the cobbles, which is important. And we talked about that in terms of you have to build all of the expenses that are related to your rewards into your target, and then also planting and different elements of the community garden. And in terms of the 3D sculptures, that was also part of the target, was it?
That's part of the larger garden budget. Yeah, because they're going to be about €15,000 each to create conservatively. So we've actually just applied for another grant for the first one of those, which is to be the kind of pilot sculpture object.
Okay.
It's also an educational program. It'll be made by transition years with professionals. So no, that was outside of the remit of the campaign.
Brilliant. And when we do these conversations with project creators, we find that a lot of preparation has gone in before you go live, and part of our role as the funded team is to guide project creators once they submit a project to our system. We'll work with you. We'll discuss the different elements of the project to get it to a place where it's ready to go live. And part of that process is to discuss your rewards and think about what you're going to actually offer your funders, something that's can be attractive. Sometimes people are actually, you know, it is a product, but for the two of you, how did you decide on what rewards to offer your funders? Because I suppose a lot of them might have been people, they're probably people in your local community. So maybe Colm, turning to you first, in terms of your rewards, I know you had some interesting rewards that were all themed around the cross. So in terms of a postcard with the St. Murray's cross on it, a special mug to commemorate the cross, but also some experiences like guided tours, which might be a bit more challenging in kind of COVID times. But how did you decide on those and the levels that you were going to offer?
I think there was a sort of a carrot thing. Anybody that contributed anything got a postcard. But then, if you wanted more than a postcard, you know, like perhaps if they contributed €20, but if you made something worthwhile, they might contribute. So the next jump, I think, was to €40, and then like from 40, it went to 100. You know, we left it so that there was a sort of a carrot to try and get people to give just a little bit more than they would. That was part of it. The other thing, everything was made by local artists, so it would, like, you're involving a lot of people. You had like there was the postcard was designed. There was a local photographer who very kindly provided prints of a very elaborate print of a photograph he had taken of the cross and things like that for nothing. And there was so the top one was a gold replica of the cross, but nobody quite made that one, so they didn't. There were a few things that I did warn people about. There was a very nice replica of the cross. It was about a foot high, so it was, and it was made of a sort of a hard plaster, very, very nice. But we found out that 2 or 3 of them had to be posted abroad, and by the time you got special packaging for them and paid for the postage, I think that they nearly came to €100. So I think you have to be very careful. Like, keep the gift small. Postage is something that is quite expensive now.
Yeah, and it's something when we're going through you know, it's never underestimate who's going to fund your project. They could be from anywhere in the world, and you do definitely need to factor in postage for especially things which are large, you know, a postcard or something like that. And turning to you, Rosemary, so your kind of main, so it's fun to cobble, it sort of does what it says on the tin, as I was saying.
Yeah.
And you did have some other interesting rewards. So the main one was an inscribed cobble that would be put down in the garden. We also had a community-made garden box, and then also garden benches as well with names on them. So can you tell me, in terms of, I suppose it's, well, the cobble part, which came first? Did the Funda Cobble idea come, or what did that come afterwards, or which came first, the cobble or the the chicken cobble?
I suppose we took a pretty common idea, really, and put a twist on it. I mean, we've all seen, you know, name a brick on a new building, or, you know, outside the Arsenal Stadium in London, all the names of everyone who has ever supported Arsenal, like hundreds of thousands of them, and those kind of things. So we just thought, okay, it's not a bricks and mortar, but we do have, you know, there are cobbles in the garden. And then we thought, okay, cobble campaign has a nice ring to it. And then engrave a cobble. How would we engrave a cobble? Is that realistic? And lots of back and forth about that. And we decided that was the best reward at that price point. We felt like it was attractive. It was
50 €.
50 euros, yeah. So we felt it was a novelty there. It was this idea of immortalizing yourself in the garden. We felt would appeal, and it was by far the best selling of the rewards. I think over half of I think there were 224 funders, and well over half of them bought cobbles, and some of them bought several, one for every aunt and uncle they ever had, and things like that. The other ones then, there was a cheaper paint a cobble one, or inscribe a cobble, so you could have your name inscribed by a graphic designer or a graphic writer on a cobble, but it wouldn't have the permanence of an engraved stone, obviously. And then there's a plant, so you can have your plant placed in the garden, and then you'll have your name on a sign to show you where your cobble or your plant is. You go and find it. Mm-hmm. And the benches proved to be very popular. They were €500. I mean, that's also a very typical thing to have in a park, and that worked too for us. It worked well.
And for that, you had to limit the amount of benches that you were going to offer.
Well, we did, yeah. I think we actually got 23 benches.
Wow. Okay.
That, because we had a number outside of the campaign who approached us directly, who wanted a number of them. So actually we were like, oh God.
There's a lot of seating there.
Yeah. So, but that was fine. I mean, really the rewards we chose were things that were going into the garden anyway. But it was nearly everything we did was to name something, to put your message in the garden, and to take ownership of that little piece of the garden. For a $5, you got, I think, a high five.
Yeah, I think it's lovely, I suppose, in terms of the rewards that both your projects were offering. There was a different type of, I suppose, column with yours. It was different people giving up their time and their talents to provide you with something for the community. And then with Rosemary, I suppose it's being part of the garden forever. And so I suppose that community engagement and feeling part of it really kind of shines through with both your projects. So we could talk about rewards for ages. It's always my favorite part of chatting with people. But I suppose in terms of other things that are important to prepare for a funded project before you go live, you both had really lovely videos for your campaigns. And Colm, we were saying, just chatting before we came online, your video, how did your committee organize that, or how did you do the production for your video?
The video was very interesting because we asked a fellow who was at secondary school who was just mad interested in photography, but he had just bought a drone and he wanted to try it out and to look, and he set it up and he took the photographs. And I think if anybody sees the actual video clip, it's quite spectacular. He takes it from different angles and things like that. But the second part, the voiceover, was also very interesting. For people in Donegal, perhaps they know that Highland Radio is the most popular of the community radio stations, so it is. And for years and years, there was a very popular morning program presented by a man called Sean Doherty. And we asked him to do the voiceover, and he quite simply did it. It didn't need second. We wrote it out for him. He said it, and we put it along with it. And it really did add to the whole thing. The voiceover is very professional, so it is. So
yeah, it really struck me. We encourage people, all projects, to have a video with their campaign, and it really struck me, your campaign. It was really slick, really, really clear, and really great. Yeah, I suppose it just shows you if you ask, some people are willing to do it for a good cause.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we found we got lots of sort of community support. For instance, we had a launch, and one of the local pubs provided the venue and finger food for the launch. They got a few people in, and presume people bought a few drinks, but it was nice to get that. That didn't cost the committee anything.
Great. And Rosemary, I suppose the same. So your video was really interesting because I suppose you got some of the different groups that were involved to actually host the video.
Yeah, that's right. Our marketing manager, Alison Rocca, he's really brilliant when it comes to creating videos and general marketing strategies. But he made this lovely 3-minute video, and it was the children who were involved in some of the projects, some parts of the project, you know, introducing the whole idea of this museum in the garden and how to get involved and how we need your help. And yeah, it just showed footage of the museum, but it was short and sweet, and we used it throughout the campaign. You know, we sent it, it was on the website and funded obviously, but we used it across all our social media and sent it out far and wide. It was a very useful thing for the whole duration of the project.
Yeah, and we encourage people, I suppose, sometimes there's, you know, people, they say, okay, I don't have the skills, but it is always really powerful to try and get something online. As you were saying there, Rosemary, I suppose in terms of communicating why you need people's support, why you need their help, and getting that message across. I think the storytelling element of what impact it will have if people fund your project. I think, you know, people, we say kind of people fund people. So even if it's showcasing, you know, what you're doing, and if you can have a few people talking, you know, a piece to camera, or whether it's a voiceover, it really does add that kind of personal connection for people. And I think we're, you know, we're now living in a much more digital age in terms of, you know, we can't really even go too far physically, so that connection online and people talking to you about how they can help is really important. So yeah, no, it was two really great videos, and I suppose the main thing with if you're thinking of doing a funded campaign, the video has to be created and uploaded to your project before you go live, so that's just part of the system, just, you know, and we kind of talk about sometimes doing small videos, small videos during the campaign to update people. It's another way of doing it as well, to kind of keep that conversation going. So video is definitely a really important part of communicating your campaign. So I might move on to, I suppose, once your project is up online, and when you're going through the process, you would have submitted it, and we would have bounced ideas off with you guys, and kind of troubleshooted the different parts of your project. But once it was online and your campaign was running, Colm, I might come to you first. What challenges did you face when the project was live, or if any challenges? What was your kind of experience once the project was running? And I know we mentioned as well the length of your campaign. You're saying that it was potentially too long, so maybe if you want to give us a little bit of an insight into that.
Yeah, well, I'll begin with my warning. We ran our campaign November, December, January, and for anybody, don't run a campaign across Christmas. You know, that's because what we found out, you know, it's when you think about it, over the Christmas period, people are at home, they have friends, and they're doing everything else. Even the committee members, everybody was busy. Nobody is going to sit and watch videos, or, you know, they're not interested in fundraising. So up to sort of about 10 days before Christmas, things were progressing grand, but it just suddenly came to a full stop, and we arrived then early January. It did take a bit of effort getting around the face with Facebook and revamping things to get the campaign back on track again. So steer clear of Christmas. Anything else?
Well, I
No,
think it's interesting, Colm, because your project ran over Christmas and into the new year.
yeah.
And I would probably say to anyone who's thinking of doing a project for around Christmas time, so that the timeline to get your project online and then for it to finish and get your funding and deliver the rewards, it's thinking out that entire timeline. It's kind of, you have to be quite strategic about it. What some people do is they do a project, a funded project before Christmas, But the expectation is that the delivery of the rewards would be in the new year.
Yeah.
So while I know Colm was running it kind of over and into the new year, I think there's definitely scope for people to do projects prior to Christmas,
Yeah.
and kind of doing a full drive then, and finishing around Christmas time, and then you can relax and have your turkey or your vegetarian vegan option, and then in the new year get down to kind of delivering your rewards.
Okay.
And Colm, can I ask as well, was there anything that surprised you, I suppose, in a positive sense throughout the campaign, whether it was community support or anything like that? Was there anything that surprised you?
Not so much surprised, but like the community support was there. Uh, Not in the sense of like a certain number of people donated, but it was the general atmosphere. There were a lot of inquiries about what was going on, and people kept their eye. We kept them up to date on the internet. Sort of we kept and things like that. But no, not surprising.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Rosemary, so coming to you, so were there any challenges once you went live? What did you focus on when you went live to promote the campaign?
Well, following your advice, really, before the campaign, before we launched it, we worked out a 6-week Marcoms plan, basically, and planned planned the communication of the whole campaign down to great detail. This was mostly Alison and Jill Cousins, our director, literally did a 6-week calendar of every tweet, every message on LinkedIn, every Instagram post, every direct mail to our mailing lists. And it was kind of planned. I mean, we maybe had the first week planned, and then as we'd go along, we'd think of new ideas and incorporate those. So the big challenge is, how do you keep asking people for money for 6 weeks without just begging? And make it interesting, engage people in the project and what it's all about. And so we just had to come up with as much variety as possible. So we target different audiences, through the Chamber of Commerce, we'd reach out and say, we have this great project happening in the center of the city. It's great for economic activity and the vitality of the neighborhood. And, for the Limerick Mental Health Association, they're our charity partners. They talked about the benefits of mental health, of gardening, and the educational benefits as well. So someone from the Men's Shed created a video, or we created a video of a representative from the Men's Shed. They talked about the value of their guys getting involved in the project. And so we were constantly communicating to different audiences in different ways. Another thing that I found useful was creating a database of the diaspora and all the groups, like a GA group in Botswana, or whatever business group in Singapore, all on there. And we just did mass mailings to, remember lovely Limerick. And
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I actually had a phone call. I was somebody there for that project, and their credit card had failed, and they were ringing from a different continent. Maybe for privacy reasons, I shouldn't really be saying much, but from a different continent. But it was because I think it was a member of their family was from Limerick. They had moved, but their family was from Limerick, and they.
I'm glad that afternoon was worthwhile.
And I suppose kind of taking a step back, I think what Rosemary and Colm are both, talking about there is, identifying who your funders might be. There's obviously the obvious people who are in your community, but it's worth thinking about identifying who else will connect with this. So, I mean, Colm, there must have been a lot of historical societies or history buffs who would be fascinated with this cross, and obviously the historical significance of the cross, and targeting them, whether it's by email or just picking up the phone and having a chat with them. So it's definitely worth thinking about the broad spectrum of people who might fund your project, and thinking of a kind of spider web of all the different people who could potentially fund you. Start from the core center, your people close to you, and then kind of go out and spread out that net as wide as possible. And then in terms of, again, Rosemary, kind of what you're talking about in terms of channels of communication, there are going to be different ways that you can communicate with different people. Some people, they're online, might be a certain demographic as well, whether they use Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Whereas other people will respond better to an email, and so sometimes it might be a WhatsApp group, or it might actually just be picking up the phone and talking. So you really need to, I suppose, the way I always phrase it when I'm giving this advice is look at it granularly. Look at whether you're looking at every single person and thinking, okay, this person, their price point, okay, yeah, they might fund €50, they might fund a cobble, and the best way to contact them is most likely via email, but they also follow us on Facebook, you know, that type of thing. And I think as well, Rosemary was saying there, like the advice that we give is to plan as much as possible in advance of going live, so that you're not constantly thinking, right, okay, I'm on day 20 of my campaign, what should I write on Facebook today? So there's a huge amount of content that you can prepare in advance, just like any marketing campaign, you know. And there's a lot of scary, you know, marketing speak. If you know, there's a lot of people out there who are not marketing professionals or communications professionals, but really what it's about is just sitting down and thinking about, how do I want to tell the story of this project over the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks or however long you're going to do it. And the story is more than just help us or give us money. It has to be, it's the bigger story of why you're doing crowdfunding, why you need the funds, and what impact a person's donation or a person's pledge will have for your project. So I suppose it's thinking about that, and as well as all the planned stuff, you don't have to, you know, forget about the stuff that's going to happen. You know, if you reach, and I know you guys did it, Rosemary, you had a really lovely graphic that when you got to like 20%, you know, you posted like, we're at 20%, or thanks to our first 50 funders. So all of that organic stuff that's going to happen with your crowdfunding campaign, that's great to celebrate as well, and that's kind of all just ad hoc and as you're going. So I'm looking at the time. So I think Beatrice is going to join us at around 7:45, so in about 5 minutes. So I think she's going to log on shortly. So I suppose kind of to tie up the conversation with you guys before Beatrice comes on to talk more about the Heritage Council and supports for heritage projects in general, to kind of just focusing in on the crowdfunding again. Is there anything, I suppose, Colm, that you would, what would be your big piece of advice to somebody who's thinking about doing a crowdfunding project for their crowdfunding for their heritage project?
Well, we ended up at the end of the project with a great internet presence with lots of contacts. I think if I were doing it again, I would start and establish a very strong internet presence. You know, we had a committee. I would encourage everybody to develop their Facebook page, to develop their friends and their friends of friends, so that your network is spread out, you know, before you actually start the campaign. And the other thing, getting away from the digital side of it, one of the most effective things that we advertised with was a billboard. A big billboard that said, Save St. Mura's Cross. It's on the main road, so it has the cross just off the main road. It's this big billboard, and so many people saw it and contributed. So like, there's all, you know, you have to look at it from every angle, from the technological angle, and from the down to earth angle.
Yeah, and I think, Colm, you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of having a presence before you do a crowdfunding project. Because sometimes we do get approached by people and they would like to crowdfund, and the first question is, you know, do you have a Facebook account or do you have a website? And I suppose in terms of online, it is great to build your presence, but I think, Colm, as well, as you say, socializing the idea that you're going to be doing a crowdfunding project, that it's coming up. You know, in the first instance, just talking to people and saying, we're thinking of doing a crowdfunding campaign, and getting a bit of feedback, getting a bit of, you know, a bit of input into, I mean, they might say they'll help with it. They might say, let me know when it's live, I can promote it, or I'll fund you. But that's then second to that, just in terms of actually getting the word out there. So pressing live on once we press live and your project is up there, the time does start ticking. Now it's only ticking for you, really, but I suppose it's important to kind of get the message out there before you do it. And we've had projects that have project creators and projects and campaigns that people have been talking about it maybe 6 months in advance. They've already been talking to people. Everyone knows it's coming down the line. So if it's a billboard, that's also great. Everyone who's in and out of the town and going through there, they're definitely going to see that. And I think as well, you know, what you're saying as well, Colm, you know, there's a big focus online, but there's a lot of things that you can do which are more traditional forms of promotion or marketing that are also still just as effective. And Rosemary, coming to you, I suppose the kind of the final word on crowdfunding. Are there any is there any advice that you would give? I know you're still in the process of still delivering rewards, but is there any advice that you would give to a potential crowdfunder for Fund It?
Yeah, I think when you mention rewards, think about the rewards carefully, and make sure you work out the cost of them, and that also the time involved in delivering them, and things like postage and stuff like that. Just really make sure you fully understand what goes into them.
Yeah, I think that's when we do these chats with project creators, it's always probably the most common piece of advice that everyone says, or it says, if I was going to do this again, I would, they didn't anticipate the amount of work that goes into delivering rewards. And that's in terms of just the time of emailing all of your funders to get their addresses, or to follow up with, maybe there's an option of what they're choosing within a reward. And also, some people don't come back to you straight away. They've funded you maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago, and they might have, or 10 weeks ago, and they've forgotten that they funded you. So it can take a while to get in contact with people as well. And also, I suppose, just in terms of depending on what type of project it is, you know, it might be, your project might actually be the output that you're delivering to people, so you have to do that. And as well, people are, what we find as well, people are very patient as well. So if you're delivering your projects, you know, manage expectations from the outset. If you think you're not going to be able to deliver a reward for 6 months, just say it. That's, you know, people who use crowdfunding for their album, a lot of the time the album isn't coming out until the next year. So that would be kind of a follow-on from what Rosemary was saying there. Was there anything else, Rosemary?
Nothing really springs to mind. I mean, I would have liked if, when people got the automatic confirmation from Fund It of their reward, that could have been, and maybe it could have, and we didn't discuss it at the time, but if it could have been something, information about following up with rewards, because I was inundated with emails from people saying, oh, do I need to give you the details for my reward? If there had been a sort of specific email that we could have formatted directly, you know, rather than one that's automatically generated by the website, that we could have addressed it to the funder and said, hold off, sit tight, we'll come back to you for details of the reward. I don't know if that is possible through Fund It. But it certainly would have saved a lot of correspondence back and forth, you know, communicating that to people. It's just a small thing.
Yeah, and I think that is the part of the process that people don't anticipate that will take so much, because I suppose we hand the email, so the only personal information that Fund It has from funders is their email address, and then I suppose in terms of GDPR and everything, we hand everything over to the project creator, and then they kind of do the rest and communicate with everyone. So okay, I see Beatrice is there as well. Hi there, Beatrice. You want to turn off your mute there? You're on mute. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome. So Beatrice Kelly is Head of Policy and Research at the Heritage Council. So we've heard from two project creators, very, very different projects. Collectively, they've raised over €30,000, and that's part of two larger fundraising campaigns and larger projects that they've been working on. But I suppose, Beatrice, and thanks for joining us, I suppose taking a step back, there might be people listening into tonight's webinar who are thinking of doing a project that is related to a heritage project, maybe in their local community or an organisation that they're attached to. And I wonder, it'd be really great to maybe let people know what kind of supports could the Heritage Council provide, whether that's in terms of funding or other resources.
Well, it's nice to be able to talk to you today rather than 2 days ago, because courtesy of the Ministers O'Brien and Noonan, we've got better news than we might have had. Heritage overall in the public sector has received an increase of 46%, which I can't believe I'm saying to you, so that's great. And we, then the Heritage Council, our budget has now gone up to 9.5 million, and our intention is obviously to restore a grant scheme that some of you may be familiar with, that we ran for many years, the community-based grant scheme. So we hope to have a fund of €1 million for next year for that. And we had run a scheme this year, just very recently, with a slightly crazy timeline, about 8 weeks work and a very tight budget as well. So I know there's quite a lot of disappointed punters out there, but we're hoping that next year the Heritage Council will be able to offer this scheme. It's geared particularly at sort of heritage groups and community and voluntary groups, into which organisations such as the Hunt Museum also fall, because they're heritage organisations and they're also in the Museum Standards Programme. So I suppose the thing about the Heritage Grants scheme is that it is aimed at heritage, while there are other types of support you might get from LEADER or different community development projects. We are trying to look specifically at the heritage aspects. There's also other funds that maybe next year will happen as well. Some of you may be familiar with the National Monuments Service in the new department of, what is it? It's Housing, Local Government and Heritage. And they also advertised a grant scheme, very tight time frame again, just in the past sort of few weeks, but they will be intending to run that next year, which will be geared to, again, private owners and also community groups to do work on national monuments. Obviously, there'll be quite a lot of controls, and as Colm was saying, you need a conservation architect and endless plans, but at least there is money there, which there hasn't been for many years. A number of the local authorities as well, through the heritage offices, also run very small-scale grant schemes. Not every local authority, but I know certainly in Galway County and in Meath and in Kildare, small-scale grants. I know in Donegal they run ones for thatch and vernacular houses, but there can be maybe sort of €300 or €500, which sometimes can be enough to get something going, and maybe start sort of other schemes. So I suppose in general the mood of music is a bit more optimistic for heritage. There has always been the LEADER funding, but that usually is, it's a massive burden to take on, an administrative burden, I think, for any group, let alone a voluntary group where people are doing it in their spare time and in the evenings. We're hoping that next year the Heritage Council will be able to offer that grant scheme. Mm-hmm. So, and again, while it's been extremely interesting listening to the sort of experience of both of you from on the crowdfunding side, because the one thing about crowdfunding, while it sounds, there's a massive amount of work and engagement and all of that, it's your money to do what you wish with, as it were. Whenever with a grant scheme, there's always sort of strings attached, of course. So in some ways, the crowdfunding side, say for us from the Heritage Council, if we saw that you were intending to do crowdfunding, and in particular if you were going to use Funded, because we really appreciate the work that business starts do in sort of coaching people, we'd instantly know that that means that you've got a skill set in your group, which means the long-term sort of funding of that project will have been thought about. Because, you know, even if the campaign has been for 3 months or 6 weeks, you know, you've sort of put those skills together, and you've put that experience together that will be incredibly valuable to ensure that your project, or whatever it is you're looking after, you'll know how to sustain that in the longer term. Because while at the moment we may have funding for grant schemes, we know that in a couple of years or so that situation could change again. So the public sector money is always, it's like a tap, you know, it turns on, it turns off. While, you know, in some ways crowdfunding, it might, I don't know, I mean, I haven't crowdfunded, so I'm afraid I'm just sort of speaking as an outsider, but I get a sense that it might leave you a certain amount of control, maybe, in the sense that you can decide what you're trying to raise money for, when, who you're targeting, you know, who you're working. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, actually. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Beatrice. That's really interesting there. You know, there's a few different sources I think that people could go to now in terms of like local authority and leader. And I think I was talking to Colm about that. So, you know, I suppose in terms of unlocking other sources of funding, that piece around crowdfunding, showing more credibility in terms of your team, whatever kind of team that is, and that can really be a springboard. And we would see it in kind of lots of different, you know, in kind of the fundraising world of raising that fund will a lot of the time unlock another fund. And I suppose I'm looking at the time here, we'll probably try and tie it up, but Colm, you're actually thinking of doing another crowdfunding project, which I think is really interesting. And maybe I suppose, you know, in response to Beatrice there, in terms of how you're looking at that with your overall project, would be interesting to hear.
No, just our project at the moment is in a sort of an in-between phase. Before we're allowed to do anything with our national monument, there are a series of experiments that have to be done on it, you know, and they're long term. Now, unfortunately, everybody, all the grants limit the time, and it becomes very difficult. Like we're looking at, we're starting a scheme next week. The cross that we're working with is tilted slightly forward, and we don't know, is this a relatively new thing? So we've got funding and, you know, and our own funding to get engineers to observe it, but they have to observe it over a year or 2 years to see if it's actually tilting more, or if this is just it was always like that. So like we can't avail, there are lots of funds of grants that you just can't avail of. So I think that a lot of the organisations, both the Heritage Council and the National Monuments, they should be aware that these, like, heritage is not a short-term project. You know, so I think that's so. Like we'll have to have at least a 2-year hiatus now before we actually move on. But the next part then is going to be, once we have all our results, we will be told what to do, or what we're allowed to do with the cross, and that will be the presentation. You know, how it's going to be preserved, which is going to be very expensive. So we'll be looking for grant aid and crowdfunding, and it's like the leader money that you get, it's only 80% maximum of what you have to, so you'll have to have additional funds to flesh it out. So you will, so like the grant aid for short-term projects works. For longer-term projects, I think we'll have to look at it.
Great.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks, Colm. Okay, well, I think we're running out of time, so I think we might leave it there. But thank you to Rosemary from the Hunt Museum, and Colm from the Fahan Heritage Group, and Beatrice from the Heritage Council. Thank you all for joining us this evening. For anyone who's watching or who has clicked on this on YouTube, the easiest way to find out about Fundit is just to log on to fundit.ie. To submit a project, you just press submit a project. You can submit a draft project. It doesn't have to be perfect or in its final form. Our team of fundraising experts will review it. You'll go through a moderation process, and if there's other supports that you need that might also be around your heritage project, Beatrice and the Heritage Council, they'll be launching their grants in 2021, so stay tuned for updates on that. And I'd encourage you to take a look at what the Hunt Museum are doing online as well. They have a really lovely program of online events for all ages as well, so definitely tune into that. So thank you to everybody, and good night. And if you have any questions, you can email info@fundit.ie and someone will get back to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.